In the previous part of this video, we showed you how to create a REST virtual service from scratch and have it up and running as soon as possible. In this part of the video, we'll improve it, adding some more realistic behavior. We'll continue where we left off previously with our fraud detection service project. If you don't have the project available, just open the Claim Processing Fraud REST demo from SV Designer sample projects and select the After First Video data model. Now let's carry on with the changes. So as the next step, let's perhaps teach the service something more generic, say how to detect an attempt to falsify someone's identity. We'll need a new rule, and this time we'll create 2 rows in it. One for mammography, which is not very likely for male patients. And the other one for prostate surgery, which is quite uncommon for female patients. Now let's save, restart the simulation, and try this out on Mr. Holmes again. Oops, seems like the output is still the same, which is not what we wanted. So let's try to investigate. For this purpose, we'll use the simulation preview. Let's press F11 to display the data model in full screen and select the columns of our interest. We'll need the social security number, treatment, and gender. And on output, we're going to need the fraud type and risk score. Now let's base our investigation on this row. So put here the social security number of Mr. Holmes, and we indeed get the repeated offender instead of falsified identity. That means this rule produced the result. And well, that makes sense because it has a higher priority. And while it's true, Sherlock Holmes is a repeated offender, having falsified identity on input is more specific and informative in this case. So let's change priority of these 2 rules. Well, now we have it as requested, and we can immediately test also for the prostate cancer in women. Well, doesn't look good. That's because we haven't filled in the values. Okay, now it seems it works. Let's test from the refund form. Okay, seems for Mr. Holmes it's working, and for Mrs. Poirot it seems to be working as well, including the risk score. So far, we've been using rules to match data in request using functions and generate some value in response accordingly. But sometimes you may want to work with just the response part and fill in certain values based on what has been already populated in other response fields. Take the risk score, for example. Calculating it is currently kind of spread over all the rules, and that's not nice from the maintenance perspective. Perhaps it would help to have a rule dedicated just to calculation of risk score once we know what the fraud type is. So let's create a new rule called risk score calculation. We define a new row for each of our fraud types. So if in response the fraud type is unspecified, do set the risk score to 0. For repeated offenders, set it to 22. For falsified identity, put it to 33, and so on. Let's save, restart the simulation. Of course, in real life, we would have more rows here and a bit more complicated logic, but for now, let's keep things simple. If we check the simulation preview and base it on this row that contains Mr. Holmes's social security number, you can see the risk score is 22. And see, we didn't have to remove the original value of 20 because our new rule has overridden the original value as it has a higher priority. This is also a good opportunity for us to show how several rules can play together nicely when constructing a single response. Well, let's put something here. And now you can see that each of the fields in our response has been populated by a different rule. Clicking Go to Source, you can see the claim ID has been populated by the default rule, whereas the fraud type has been populated by the repeated offenders rule and risk score by our new risk score calculation rule. In the next part of the video, we'll show you the advanced data model functions that will help you in many real-world scenarios.